What if Genesis isn't just explaining how everything fell apart, but revealing how redemption was already set in motion? Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4. My name is Karen. I'm your host, and this is Blooming Desert. To many, Genesis is often read as a story of how everything went wrong, a book that emphasizes the fall of humanity, not just with Adam and Eve, but a constant echo of sin. But if you read it closely, it's actually much deeper than humans' fall. It's God Himself revealing to humanity, to us, the reader. Genesis begins with a big emphasis that is often missed. And it starts with a simple word that has profound revelation, and that word is the beginning. The Hebrew word for the beginning reveals to us that it's the very essence of who He is. The beginning, a word translated by the Hebrew word bereshit, is not first about what God did, but who God is. Genesis does not simply point to a moment in time, but to origin and source. It speaks of the head, the first, the one from whom all things flow. Genesis does not begin with activity, but with identity. Before everything is spoken in order, the earth is described as formless, empty, and dark. Yet God, He's not absent. The Spirit of God is moving, hovering over what is barren. He is present before transformation, active before structure, and near before clarity. It's so easy to get focused on the creation and miss the introduction of who the Creator is. We tend to focus on the outcome, the formation, the visible results, yet the text invites us to first trust the God who moves in emptiness, who is unthreaded by void, and who begins His work long before anything blooms. Before humanity, before order, before light, God is introducing Himself, not by name, but by being. He's the beginning and He's also the source. He's the Alpha and the Omega, the one who was and is to come. This is His first appearance in Scripture, and it's intentional that He's revealed before anything is formed. In addition, it is also the place where God speaks the first prophecy, a promise planted in the middle of a fall. What the enemy sought to destroy, God declared that one day it would be redeemed. And that promise becomes the thread that carries us through every desert that follows in Scripture. Beneath every failure and every fracture, Genesis is quietly telling another story, the story of a God who keeps meeting people in their deserts. From the beginning, God is presenting Himself to us as a faithful Father, as eternal and unchallenged. God is not introduced as a character emerging within the story. He is before the story. And John 1:1 confirms and reveals that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. God also presents Himself as a God of order, a God who organizes what was formless and void. God moves towards disorder, not away from it. Chaos is not evidence of God's absence, but rather it's the very space where God works. Through every aspect of creation, God is personal and intentional. Creation wasn't rushed. God took His time. He would pause to see, to evaluate that it was good. This lets us know that He notices. He's a God who is personally involved with what He creates. He also reveals to us that He is a God who blesses before sin entered. He blessed up and provided everything. He laid out everything to humanity, everything that they would need. Blessing was God's first posture towards creation, not correction. And I love that in a perfect setting, God still displays Himself as relational. Genesis 1:26 reveals that He was wanting covenant with humanity, and without explaining the mystery, God reveals plurality within unity, which throughout Scripture He's revealing to us a relational God. Not only is He relational, but He also reveals to us that He is a present God, one who not only created, spoke everything into existence, formed with His hands, or even a God that breathed into men's nostrils. But Genesis is also telling us that he is near. He engages and he seeks. Lastly, he speaks a promise after failure. God's response to humans' failure is not withdrawal, but redemption. Before consequences are fully explained to mankind, hope is declared, prophecy is echoed, and victory is at the door. So, this is Genesis, a revelation of divine faithfulness. Even in a perfect world, fully aware that humanity would one day fall, God chose relationship. He walked with humanity before sin ever entered the story. And when humanity failed, he did not withdraw. Instead, he pursued it. He judged with justice and covered them with mercy. The God who judges is the same God who walked among us in flesh. He's a God that tore the veil that separated heaven and earth. And then he sent his counselor to remain with us. Relationship didn't end at the Garden of Eden. It didn't end with failure, and it most definitely didn't end at the cross. So then the question becomes, what does that look like in real fractured human lives? Genesis answers this question very quickly. God's character is revealed through the lives marked by grief, waiting, fear, and flawed decisions. And it's here that Genesis is an opportunity for us to slow down. It's an invitation to watch God interact with specific people, not heroes, not ideals, but women. Women such as Eve, Sarah, Hagar, and others that we will slowly explore each week. Women whose stories unfolds in desert places of grief, waiting, fear, and even consequence. Each woman mentioned in the Bible has her own story, her own desert, so we will uncover one desert, one woman, one story at a time. And this week we will slightly uncover Eve's story. Eve's story is often reduced to a single moment of failure, but scripture refuses to leave her right there. Her life after Eden tells us a much truer story, one that was shaped by consequence, yes, but it's also a story of longing, grief, hope, and most importantly, it's about a story of a God who never steps away. When Adam and Eve leave the garden, they do not leave God. In their shame, God covers them not with something temporary or self made, but with garments that require the shedding of innocent blood. This is the first time death enters the story, not as punishment alone, but as covering. It is the first gospel preached not in words, but in mercy. Even here, God is teaching them that restoration will be costly and that He Himself will have to provide what they cannot. Eve walks into a desert carrying a promise spoken directly to her, that the seed of the woman would one day crush the head of the serpent. She does not know yet how this promise will unfold. She only knows that it will come through her. And then, in the middle of this story, she becomes a mother. When Cain is born, Eve speaks words full of hope, words that reveal she believes a promise may already be taking shape according to the Hebrew language. She's not wrong to hope this way. She's simply human. How often do we do the same? A word is given to us, a promise is spoken, and we begin to watch the calendar, the circumstances, and even the evidence that we are seeing. We want to recognize fulfillment as soon as it appears. We want redemption to move quickly, cleanly, and we don't want further loss. Eve's hope was sincere, but it was also premature. What she does not know yet is that God's promises are not fulfilled to our clocks nor calendar, but rather they unfold across generations through suffering, through the waiting, and often through disappointment. Cain is born into a fallen world, and even though Eve hopes he will be the answer, he becomes the evidence the world that she's in is still deeply broken. This is where Eve enters a grief a few of us can comprehend. She does not only lose his son, she loses a version of hope she had been holding. Abel is murdered, Cain is exiled, and Eve becomes the very first woman to carry sorrow many women still carry today. And that is the grief of seeing a promise delayed, distorted, or wounded by choices beyond the control. She's both the mother of innocent and the mother of guilty. There's no ceremony recorded for Abel's burial, nor lament written from Eve's loss. Scripture leaves space instead, space that feels heavy, and we question her grief. It cannot be explained, only endured. Yet Eve does not turn away from God. When she speaks again at the birth of Seth, her words are different. This time there's no urgency, no assumption that redemption has arrived. She recognizes instead that God has appointed another seed, not because Abel has been replaced and not because her pain has been erased, but because the promise still stands. This is mature faith. Not the faith that expects quick answers, but the faith that trusts God even when fulfillment is stretched beyond a lifetime. The truth is, Eve never sees the head of the serpent being crushed, but she sees the line, the lineage preserved. And that is enough for her to keep believing. Her story speaks directly to women who have received a word and moved ahead too quickly. Women who assume the first sign of life must be the fulfillment itself. Eve reminds us that God is not offended by our hope, but He will often refine it through the waiting. What feels like delay is not denial, and what feels like loss is definitely not the end of a promise. Sometimes faith looks like learning to trust God all over again, this time with deeper humility and quieter confidence. I don't know what you've lost in your desert or what's made you believe that it's all done. But what I do know is that God doesn't take us to a desert to leave us there. It is in this very dry season where once again He echoes His promises to us, where He whispers, "It's not over." Even if we've made choices that has led us to deserts, He still meets us right there and gives us the opportunity to bear new fruit and new seed. A promise that was given in a moment that the enemy tried to take it all away, God showed up. Eve's desert wasn't only about what was lost, it was about what was whispered, what was questioned, and what seemed harmless at first. Next week, we'll dive into the very moment deception entered the story, the subtle lies, the assurances that never came from God, and how the enemy's strategies try to trap us in our very own desert. But even there, God's faithfulness is already at work. In the meantime, I leave you with this. Even in the darkest moment, God's character doesn't change. Instead, it's revealed to us. The beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, remains relational, faithful, and redemptive. I hope this was a blessing to you. Until next time, God bless.